Okay, perfect. So just to recap, since I wasn't recording, this is Chelsea Dorough, licensed clinical social worker and mental health therapist. So today, if you could start by telling us what the work you do and what a regular day looks like for you.
Okay, so primarily, almost exclusively, I provide individual therapy to children, teenagers, and adults. In the past, I also did family work or connected those individuals to other community resources that they might have needed. So I work at a group private practice, which means there's a collection of therapists, about 15 of us, who all rent space out of the same office building, kind of work 9 to 6 with a 1-hour lunch break. I'm in session with one-on-one for 45 to 53 minutes. And then I have 5 minutes to pee and get coffee and do documentation and answer emails and then start my next one.
What inspired you to become I forgot to put that in. What inspired you to become a therapist?
I don't know exactly. I remember I'd gone through college and got my bachelor's degree in human communication. And I don't think I had like a specific job in mind. I thought maybe teaching would be something that I would enjoy. And then I got a job at an after school program and realized I actually didn't like teaching people how to learn. That wasn't fun to me. And so, and then the recession happened and I couldn't get a job in any kind of like human or social welfare job that I wanted. So I was working in retail. And there was a day I was like folding jeans at Abercrombie and Fitch and realized there is nothing more important I could be doing right now than making these jeans look pretty. And I can't do this the rest of my life. I didn't feel like I was particularly smart in any special way. Like I'm not great at math. Science is like, I can sort of make sense of it. But I've always cared a lot about people and been really interested in how relationships work. And so I looked into jobs like, can you make a job out of that? And then in doing my research, it turned out that social work is kind of more, it's better funded. There are a lot more grant programs that will support social work, and it's more federally recognized, meaning that you can get more jobs with a social work degree than you can maybe as a licensed marriage and family therapist or licensed professional counselor.
So is that how you decided? So you, just to recap, you went to college, can I share a little bit about our relationship with each other?
Yes.
So full disclosure, Chelsea and I went to high school together. So we've known each other probably since we were 14 years old. We didn't go to college together, I guess, because you went straight to four-year university, right?
I came back though and went to PC my sophomore year.
Yeah, so we did do a little bit of community college together. And then we also briefly lived together while she was working on her master's degree in social work and I was working on my master's degree in English literature. So I already know a little bit about her life to kind of, we went away to college and then you said the recession happened. So
yeah.
What does that mean? What, for these students who were born, 2 or 3, 4 years before the recession, what was it and what happened?
It means companies were laying people off. Programs that relied on federal funding or grant sources were losing their funding sources and having to downsize. And so it was really hard to find a job.
Right. It was, yeah. And so you said you graduated from college with a degree in human communications and then had to start working at Abercrombie and Fitch. And yep. On my end, I graduated from college and moved home to live with my parents because I did not think I could find a job in Los Angeles to support me. So is that what helped you decide to go back to school? Was there's a recession, maybe now's a good time for me to pursue a master's degree, right? And wait.
Yeah, I mean, it was, I don't like what I'm doing. If I want the kind of job that I want that would use the skills that I think I have, which is caring about people, is going to require extra education. And since I can't find a job right now anyway, I might as well just go back to school right now.
So tell us a little bit more about the road to becoming a licensed clinical social worker, which allows you to be a therapist, what does that master's in social work require in order for you to get that license and be allowed to practice therapy?
So it's a 60-unit master's program. So for 2 years of going to school full time. During that time, you have to do an internship, and I think it was a total of 800 hours of working for free while in the master's program, 16 hours a week. Some people some people that had kids already or families were having to work and then do 15 units of master's level coursework and 16 hours a week of internship. It's a lot. So the 2-year program, the 800 hours of internship time. And then once you graduate, you work for free or for very, very cheap until you accrue another 3,200 hours of experience working with clients. So you basically either maintain a full-time job and have another internship sort of where you're considered a clinical associate, which means you're now accruing your hours toward licensure, or you get a job at an agency or something making not great money and working full-time, getting those 3,200 hours, and then you take your board exams. And the state's requirements for those board exams are different. For me, for social work in California, which is where I originally was licensed, I'm now licensed in Texas as well. It was a law and ethics exam, and then also the clinical boards.
And you did your internship, if I remember correctly, with Adult Protective Services, right?
I did too, yeah. My first internship was with Alcohol and Drug Abuse Services of Orange County, which was a mandated substance abuse treatment program. And then my second year internship was with Adult Protective Services.
And I did the math there. So 3,200 hours at 40 hours a week, that takes about 80 weeks. So it's like a year and a half of working after you finish the master's degree.
Usually it takes more like 2 to 2.5 years, because that's assuming that all 40 of those hours are considered client hours. And so in your work week, you might spend 8 hours of your 40 doing documentation or sending emails or attending meetings, and those hours do not count toward your 3,200. So the only hours you can count are the hours that you spend in session with a client or going to a meeting at a client's school. Some social workers will help with 504 plans and special education requirements and things like that. So only those hours count toward your 3,200. And while you're doing that, you have to meet with a supervisor for an hour every week who goes over your notes and makes sure your treatment plans look good and make sure you're acting and practicing ethically and following all the legal requirements. What else do you have to do? I don't know. Keep asking questions.
Yeah, no, so this is great. So far, I'm just wanting to just make sure for our listeners here. So from start to finish, from graduating high school to being able to practice therapy without a supervisor, what's the timeline for that? So college, master's degree, at hours, how many years does it take before you are, running your own practice like you are now?
Like 8 to 9.
8 to 9 years. So that's about the same timeline.
I feel like I should be a doctor and I should make a lot more money.
But you get to help people, right? That's like you said, your skill set was listening to people, right? So I kind of want to move in. We'll go to the next slide. Ooh, and I keep going the wrong direction. So can you talk a little bit about play therapy? And you had mentioned you work with children, teenagers, and adults, but one of the things that I've always found so interesting is the concept of play therapy.
Yeah, so play therapy is something that I've actually only gotten into in the last 5 or 6 years. I originally did not think I would want to work with children, and then it turns out I actually really love it because they're so creative and they keep me creative and they keep things interesting. But the basic theory of play therapy is that play is the language of children. They communicate to us through their play. So the toys that they use are their words, and the ways that they use those toys is is essentially like their tone of voice. And that's how they tell us the story of what they're going through. You can also tell a lot about a person and their headspace by looking at, if you're going into somebody's home, is their home super clean? That might be more like on the anxiety side of the spectrum. If their home is kind of dirty and it looks like they just don't have the energy or motivation to pick up after themselves or wipe that surface down, we're looking more like depression. And the playroom can kind of show things like that too. I think this is a child who has ADHD. So you can see like we used just about everything in the playroom this day. And so that helped me to see, wow, this kid, like they get excited about one thing and then they look over and they see something else that's super interesting and their mind really struggles to focus and to stay in one area. I feel like I'm getting off track, but.
No, I think this is great. I think this is really helpful. So for this student, this child in particular, if you guys are playing and you see that they're all over the place, what would be like a coping strategy? What like type of treatment would you pursue with the kid, the kid that is playing with every toy across the room?
So the main part of therapy, whether you're a kid, a teen, or an adult, is building a safe and trusting relationship. And so it's really, I would much rather allow this child to use every single toy in the room and me show them that I accept them and I see them, and I will describe what they're doing for them to help them develop awareness over time. I might point out, wow, you just got the cash register out and now and then you saw the foam swords over there and you left the cash register and moved to the foam swords. Wow, we just started having a sword fight and then you saw those colorful little, I call them my ninja stars. They're not ninja stars, they're connectors or something, and then so I'm helping them recognize what their mind is doing. And then eventually they have that awareness and they can start being like, oh, wait, actually, I want to finish this thing first. But it starts by just having a safe place where they feel like they can be themselves and somebody's not correcting them or telling them there's something wrong with them or that they need to settle down or that they need to be quiet. They can just be themselves.
So what is the equivalent of play therapy for a teenager or an adult where, as we've grown up, like play is still very important, right? Like but the older we get, the less we tell teenagers and adults it's okay to play. So how do you practice play with adults and teenagers in therapy?
So I actually encourage play a lot with my teens and adults, and that's part of why I like having the playroom. Adults always walk in because you can't see it in the picture, but there's also a section in my office where there's a nice couch and pretty pictures and bookshelves, and it looks more grown up. But it never fails that an adult walks in for their first session and says something like, oh, are we going to get to paint today? Or, oh, do we get to play? And I say, would you like to? Because absolutely. This place is for you to do what you need to do. And you might find you need to express yourself in a variety of ways. One thing that adults and teens take to pretty well is sand tray. And so you can see the sand box on the floor there where all the little ninja stars are. Yeah, that normally is on my little table where the cash register is. And behind that table are some bookshelves, and they have figurines of all different kinds, warriors and soldiers to fairy tale creatures to princesses and cars and trucks and planes and snakes and birds and chickens. And you can ask a client, a teen or adult, to create a picture in the sand that represents something that they're dealing with. And it helps them kind of just use symbols and more creative language to express themselves than just sitting and talking.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Can you tell us a little bit more about the different types of therapy that can be practiced and, what types of therapy you often practice? I know that, there's cognitive behavioral therapy. There are some other, that's the one I know right off the top of my head. So can you share a little bit more about types of therapy that you can practice?
There are so many kinds of therapy. It's, I think first it's like, what is your age group that you're going to work with? there's lots of different styles of play therapy. So there's child-centered play therapy where you really don't tell the child what to do. You let the child lead kind of 100% of the time. A lot of people will do a blend of that with Adlerian, which uses some cognitive behavioral principles. It's a kind of a mix of the adult will bring up different issues or different creative ideas or ways to process thoughts and feelings. Like you might make puppets, and you might make a puppet that represents the mean, like scary voice in your head that tells you you're not good enough. And then you make a puppet of your best version of yourself and go back and forth. And so that's, the therapist leads that a little bit more. As far as the other kinds of therapy goes, it kind of depends on what kind of problems you'd like to help people with, because there are couples therapists and there are family therapists, and those are very different dynamics. You might end up working with siblings and not a whole family, but just a brother and a sister who are not getting along very well. Or you might do individual therapy. So like kind of picking the population you want to work with, and then also like eating disorders, or which is a very specialized kind of treatment that I don't know very much about because I don't work with eating disorders, or depression and anxiety. You can do like talk therapy or cognitive behavioral therapy, which is kind of learning how what you think affects how you feel, and what you feel affects how you behave, and kind of breaking down those patterns of thinking and behaving that might be contributing to your own problems. I specialize in trauma and dissociative disorders, so things like PTSD. A lot of individuals who either have recently, as children, experienced child abuse or sexual abuse, or witnessed domestic violence in their homes, or a lot of adults who went through that as children or have gone through those kinds of things as adults. And I recently got certified in Emdr, which stands for eye movement desensitization reprocessing. And that's a type of therapy that involves use of your like identifying thoughts, feelings, and body sensations that connect to a traumatic experience from the past, and allowing yourself to think of that while either doing eye movements or some other kind of activation of the body left to right at the same time that seems to help you digest it and like let go of the garbage.
That's great. Thank you. That was really good. Before we move on, I do want to just kind of open it up briefly. Does anybody have any questions about the types of therapy that can be practiced by a therapist, or any like specific questions about that part of the conversation before we kind of move on? You will have a chance to ask questions again, but if you have any questions you want to drop in the chat, go ahead and ask now, or we can move on afterwards. I'm not seeing any questions. Okay, so we'll move on. So we're going to talk a little bit about grit. So can you talk about what motivates you and what you do when you want to give up? What was your hardest professional obstacle to overcome? And then you can give an example of a time in your life when you had to show grit. The second two might go together, and that's okay.
Okay. Motivation. I like to feel competent, and I like to feel capable. It's very important to me that others see me as competent and capable as well. And so when I feel like I'm not good enough, or I feel stupid, or in the therapy world, I don't know if teachers have it too, we have imposter syndrome, which is a very real thing, where it's like, oh my gosh, like I'm a fraud. I don't know, like, do I know what I'm doing? I know I have 8 years of training, like specialized training and experience. And I know I've read all of these books and listened to all of these podcasts, and I am constantly trying to learn and understand. But like, sometimes I just feel like people are going to think I'm fake. And so I cope by being a student. And when I feel like I'm running into a problem that clients are having, or even in my personal life, if I find that I'm struggling with in a certain area of my life, I'll buy books or I'll listen to podcasts, and I'll try to learn and understand myself in the situation better. And then I feel equipped to deal with whatever might come next. The professional obstacle. that was hard to overcome was probably getting my first job as a therapist. So here I am. I've graduated with my master's degree. So I'm feeling really proud and like, yeah, I got these letters after my name. I'm going to go in and be a therapist. But I also had moved from Southern California to Northern California above Sacramento. So I lost my entire network. I no longer had teachers or people that I'd done internships with or anybody in the professional world to kind of get me in. And so I had done some informational interviews, trying to make those connections. And I kept applying, but it was also at the end of the recession, right? So there were people probably more qualified than me that had been out of work for a while that I was also competing with. And I ended up taking a job at a group home for $13 an hour as a residential staff. So I call that was my job, where I worked full-time as a part-time parent for children with intellectual disabilities who were also sex offenders and needed one-on-one supervision 24/7. And so I worked at this company that also had a mental health division with counselors on staff for about 8 months. And eventually they had an opening for a counselor. They knew my name. They knew the work I'd done with the clients in the homes. They'd seen my documentation, and they decided to give me an opportunity to start earning those 3,200 hours toward my licensure.
So you had to do 8 months before you even got to start doing the 3,200 hours.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
It was frustrating.
I bet. Yeah. But I guess that my question is it all worth it?
Yeah. I had to get my foot in the door. And I learned a lot of things, because I am an adult. I'm in my mid-30s and I don't have children of my own, but I'm working a lot with parents. And that job I got to see what it's like to have kids who are having meltdowns, but you still have to get them to school, and you've got to get the pea-soaked sheets in the laundry before you leave for school, and you got to make sure everybody has their meds, and you've got to make sure they've all had breakfast, and you got to get the dishes put away. Like, I got to understand some of the stressors that parents have, and I wouldn't have had that experience and that understanding otherwise. So I definitely learned, and I learned a lot about the system and the group home system and parts of the mental health world that I wouldn't have understood as well if I hadn't had that job.
Thank you. Perfect. Okay, let's go. Oh, so this is just a day in the life of a social worker. You're crime fighting here, and then is this Honey?
Yes, that's my honeybee.
Who was barking in the background, telling us hello.
Yes.
Perfect. Great. Yeah, and then I think keep going in the wrong direction. And then okay, so just last thing is takeaways. What life lessons has your work taught you? Where do you see yourself in 10 years? And then let's start with those two.
Okay. My job has taught me a lot of things. One of the things that I love about my job is that I have to keep learning. And a main lesson is that everybody you meet can teach you something. Every single person, whether it is a 4-year-old coming in my room who just paints and says like, I love painting because I am free. Like, freedom is important to people. Or people have stories and things that they've been through that I can get wisdom from that. And so I think having that attitude of a student with whoever you meet, even if it seems like they don't know as much as you or they're not as accomplished as you, it might be true that maybe they're not as accomplished, but that doesn't mean you can't learn something from them and that they don't have something valuable to offer. And so I strive to look for that in everybody that I meet. Is what can I learn from you? Where do I see myself in? Yeah. And I think the other thing too is like our struggles become our triumphs. And it's really rewarding to see my clients who've gone through a lot of adverse adversity and really tough stuff, but then that fuels them to pursue careers in these different fields where they have authority because they earned it, and they know what they're talking about. you know yeah, and so where do I see myself in 10 years is hopefully training more and working as a supervisor and kind of pouring more into the next generation of therapists and social workers.
So you would be supervising the people getting their 3,200 hours.
Yes, I would be that person they meet with once a week.
Perfect. Thank you. And then last one, and I'll stop sharing right now. We're going to say, do you have any advice for our students? And then we're going to open it up to questions. If you guys have any questions, you can start dropping them in the chat, and Chelsea will answer them for you. Any advice that you have, Chelsea, besides, and you did say always look for lessons. You can always learn from others, but any parting words for someone who might want to become a therapist, what they should do or what you recommend to kind of get your foot in the door as you're sort of starting to think about it?
I mean, maybe not just for future therapists, but as you're exploring these different career opportunities and pathways, take some time to ask yourself what you really value. For me as a therapist, when I looked at the things that were important to me, it's my friends and my family. And so what that means is it's relationships. And so finding a job where I get to build intimate, special, meaningful relationships with people, I get paid to love people. And that's really special because that is like one of my biggest values. So asking yourself, what do you value? Do you value education? Do you value the environment? Do you value creativity? And let those values drive the actions that you take and the choices that you make for your career path.
I have a question. It was sent just directly to me in the chat, but the question is, do people's traumatic experiences affect you?
Yeah, sometimes. It can be really hard. Secondary trauma is a real thing. I see my own therapist. If you ever go to a therapist and they don't have a therapist, find a different therapist. Or if they haven't been, like, you definitely want a therapist who has done their own work. Because sometimes I do hear really, really tragic things, and my brain can play that movie. Our brains make up stuff, they can put the images there. And it's really hard to let that go. And so making sure we take time to do our own work and get self-care to process through all that is really important.
How does it feel to be a therapist? I guess, and the person who asked me that question, if you want to send a follow-up message, like, do you mean like on a daily basis or generally speaking?
Are they following up?
Yeah,
I would say something that most of my friends in the area are, because I'm originally from California and moved to Texas like 2.5 years ago. So all of the friends I've made here are from work. And we often joke with each other that we have a weird job. Sometimes I go to work and I'm like, I got handcuffed 3 times today. Or all of my kids made food for me. Or I heard story after story of really traumatic, tragic things that people hadn't disclosed ever before. And it was really, really heavy. And so it's so varied, but it's incredibly rewarding too, when people come in and start from a place of they're having nightmares every day and they can't get out of bed and they don't know what they want to do, like on the daily, to having hobbies and friendships and goals.
And it was on a daily basis, so thank you. And then what were your majors for your bachelor's, and then your master's was in social work, right?
Yep. My bachelor's was originally called speech communication, but they changed it as I was finishing the program. So it was human communication. And then my master's is in social work. You can get a bachelor's in social work. I just didn't know that's what I wanted to do when I was getting my bachelor's.
And then I have a logistical question here, if anyone else. One person asked about the worksheets that we have to fill out in order to earn credit. Your teacher should be able to provide that to you. So reach out to your independent study teacher and they will get you a digital copy of the worksheets. Also, is it possible to only earn 1 credit or you can earn more? So if you attend 5 chats, that is equal to 1 credit. But we have we have 23 career chats this week, and then we will have them on an ongoing basis in the future. So you can earn up to 5 credits over your high school career. It is for elective credit only. Okay, so those were the technical questions. You do need to sign in order to get credit for attending the chat, for attending today's meeting. So I'm just going to drop that into the chat one more time, and then we will verify your attendance as well. So does anybody else have any other questions for Chelsea about becoming a licensed clinical social worker and practicing therapy before we let her go? Because you are 2 hours ahead of us, right? It's time for you to have dinner.
Yes.
How's the weather over there right now? Is it snowing?
Hot.
Oh, it's hot.
No, last Monday it was tornadoes about 60 minutes north of me, and crazy rainstorms and hail. And yesterday and today it's been high 80s, low 90s.
So funny, opposite for us. Yesterday it was really warm, and today it's been pouring rain, like the worst rainstorm of the whole year. So Texas and California are always doing it opposite of each other.
Mm-hmm.
All right, guys, thank you so much for attending. Oh, I have one last question. Does the elective credit count for any elective class? Oh, so the class is called College and Career Exploration. This is not, you cannot count it for a different class. Like if you're taking, for example, like culinary arts, this is not a credit for culinary arts. This class is called College and Career Exploration, and you can earn up to 5 credits for that. I hope that answers your question. And if we don't have any other questions, I will stick around just to answer any questions, but we'll say goodbye. Thank you so much, Chelsea. I really appreciate you coming and joining us. And I know everyone's kind of off camera, but I'm just going to give you a little clap on behalf of it. This was a great chat, and I'll talk to you soon. Okay.
All right. Thanks, Megan. Bye.
And everybody else, thank you.
You're welcome.
Everyone else, if you guys are dismissed, but if you have any questions, feel free to stick around and I can answer them for you.